Hi, welcome to Terri Reid's Attic. Thank you for joining me today. So we're going to do that kind of vamp till ready for 3 more minutes. People join us. So today we're going to stop at like 3:45 so that all of us can get potty breaks, snacks, or whatever we want, and then come back at 4 o'clock and do the writers side of it, which I hope will be a lot of fun. I think on the writers thing, Andrew put a link there, and the link goes to my terrireid.com, my website. And in it, on the website, there's just an article or a little posting about the writers, the same thing. But below it, there's a link, and that link goes to a PDF that I created that's a PowerPoint presentation. And so I'll kind of be referring to that, but we couldn't do the like split screen thing because I didn't give Andrew enough time to research it and figure out how to do it. So, yes, you have homework. You have to just click on that. So you kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about, which most of us rarely have an idea about that anyway. So, yeah. So are we at like 3 or can I tell a story?
Um, we're at about 1.
Oh, okay. So sad news. A raccoon died somewhere on our property, and the turkey vultures have found it, which is very interesting. But I was out today on another part of our property, and I remembered a couple of years ago I found a baby raccoon, um, and I suddenly realized that raccoon that died could have been a mommy raccoon. So, with the help of Brody and Hemingway, I kind of walked around the perimeter of our property, making baby raccoon sounds, trying to call to baby raccoons. And I guess I'll do the sound. Okay, I'll do the sound. It's like brrr, brrr, and that's actually they purr. I didn't know that until we found a baby raccoon a couple of years ago who was adorable. But yeah, they make a little purr sound. And when you rub their bellies, oh, they love it. They purr and purr and purr. So I walked around our property. See, it's a really good thing that we live out in the country and we don't have neighbors close by because I could just imagine the phone calls to 911. That lady's out there doing stuff again.
And she's burnt out there again. I don't know what she's on.
she's making funny sounds. Anyway, good news is no raccoons came out. So it was not potentially not a mommy raccoon, or maybe the babies were old enough that they were in the trees looking down at me laughing their little raccoon faces off. So that is my story of the day. Wildlife stories with Terri Reid. So
I think you probably get started.
Okay. Andrew says I can actually tell the good stories now. So we are actually at book 3 now of Tales Around the Jack-o'-lantern. So go us. We've gone through book 1 and 2. So we're starting with chapter 1, and it says 13 years ago. Margaret O'Reilly stood at the front window, peering out into the night. The jack-o'-lanterns on the front porch had been extinguished, and the large steel candy bowl had been retrieved. There were rules now for trick-or-treating, only store-purchased treats and curfews to get children inside before it got too late. She certainly did not want to be accused of tempting the children to stay out past the allotted time. And it was past the allotted time. Quite a ways past the allotted time. He's fine, Margaret, her husband Timothy said softly, coming up behind his wife and laying a hand on her shoulder. You mustn't worry. She sighed. I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it, she whispered back. He's always on time for our stories. He probably got caught up at work, Timothy insisted. He's safe. You'd know if he wasn't. She nodded, but kept her vigil at the window. I'll feel better when I see him pull up at the curb, she said. Mary walked into the room, a large glass of Diet Pepsi in one hand and a chocolate candy bar in the other. I just got a text from Sean, she announced. He's on his way. Margaret felt the relief wash over her like an ocean wave. Timothy squeezed her shoulder softly. There you go, he said. Now come and relax for a few minutes so he doesn't see the worry in your eyes. She stepped back, let the curtain fall in place, and faced her husband. You couldn't have all been something safe, like bakers, she quipped. No, you had to all up and become police officers. Bakers, Ma? Art replied. We'd all weigh 300 pounds and die of heart attacks. Or get our arms pulled off by those giant mixing machines, Tom added. Or eat raw cookie dough and die an awful death, Mary teased. Margaret grinned and shook her head. Enough. The three of you have no respect for your mother, she complained mildly. Art walked over and enfolded his petite mother in his arms. We have respect, fear, and love, he said softly. Mostly love, but we don't want you to worry. She brushed a hand quickly over her moist eyes. It's a mother's prerogative to worry, she said, placing a kiss on her son's cheek. But thank you for the hug. Everyone paused and looked towards the door when they heard a car pulling up at the curb. That's got to be Sean, Mary said, walking toward the door. About time. She opened the door just as Sean dashed up the steps. Hey, sorry I'm late, he said breathlessly, grabbing a candy bar out of the stainless steel bowl sitting on the entryway table. But I had to stay late to hear the rest of the story. What? Art asked. You stayed late because of a story on Halloween night? Not just any story, Sean said, moving over to the front room and sitting in a chair. A ghost story. He looked at them and grinned. A really great ghost story. Timothy turned off the lights in the room, so the only thing illuminated was the flickering glow of the jack-o'-lantern on the coffee table. Well then, sit yourselves down, he said, and let's get this evening going. Sean, it looks like you'll be the first. Sean nodded. Great. This is so cool, he began. So my part of the story started this evening around 7, but the story really started about a month ago when Martin and Kelly Medford, a brother and sister, were out late one night. We probably should go home, Kelly Medford said to her twin brother as they drove away from the high school stadium. It's late, and we both have to work tomorrow. Martin glanced over at his sister, then shook his head. There's a party at Joe's, he argued. We don't have to stay real late, but we need to at least show up. Joe's is all the way on the other side of town, Kelly replied. It's too close to the city. Mom won't like us going into the city. Martin rolled his eyes. Who says Mom has to know? Kelly sighed and flopped back into her seat. Fine, we can go, she agreed, but we can't stay long. They arrived at Joe's house about 20 minutes later, and before long, they had forgotten about their mutual promise to leave early. When Kelly finally took the time to glance at her phone, she was shocked at the time. Crap, she exclaimed, looking around the house for her brother. It's after 2. She finally found him engaged in an argument about the Chicago Bears offensive line with a bunch of football players. Martin, she said, interrupting him, it's past 2. We are so dead. In disbelief, Martin pulled out his own phone and looked. We gotta go, he said to his friends, and they both hurried out of the house. I thought you were going to watch the time, he accused as they walked down the dark street toward their car. I never said that, Kelly replied. You're the one who wanted to go. Don't give me that, he argued back. You were having just as much fun as... Martin paused and then exhaled loudly. Great. Kelly looked over at her brother. What? Then she saw the officer standing next to their car. What did you do? She whispered to her brother as they walked slowly toward the officer. I might have parked a little close to a fire hydrant, he whispered back. You are such an idiot, she whispered fiercely. Now we are really dead. They walked up to the car. The officer was standing on the other side in the road. This your car? He asked. The two nodded. Yeah, Martin said, his voice low. It's ours. Aren't you a little young to be out so late? The officer asked. We were at our friend's house up the block and we lost track of time, Kelly inserted. We're really sorry. The policeman paused for a moment, looking at the teens before pulling out a notebook. I won't give you a ticket for breaking curfew, he said, but I've got to give you one for parking. If there had been a fire, your car would have blocked access to the hydrant. You need to be more aware of where you park. Yes, sir, Martin replied. You're right. I'm sorry. Can I have your driver's license, please? Martin handed over his license, and they stood in the cold night air, waiting while the officer transferred the information from the license to the ticket. Finally, he ripped the ticket from the pad and handed it and the license back to Martin. You have a month to pay the ticket, he said. It shouldn't go on your permanent record unless you get another ticket in the next 30 days. We won't, Kelly assured him. We'll be very safe. He nodded, and his lips turned into a half smile. See that you are, he replied. Then he turned away and walked back down the street. Kelly and Martin lost no time in getting into their car and starting the drive home. Remember, no speeding, she cautioned her brother. He nodded. Yeah, I know, he said. For all of our luck, he's following us, making sure I don't make another mistake. We are so dead, Kelly said. When Mom and Dad find out about the ticket, they won't find out, Martin said. We'll just pay it ourselves. Do you know how much it is? Kelly asked. $100. We'll have to work overtime and save our spending money, he replied. We can't let them know. They drove in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Hey, Cal, Martin finally said. Yeah? You know, that policeman, he continued hesitantly, did he what? Did he kind of give you the willies? What? She asked, surprised. Did he kind of freak you out? Martin asked. She shook her head. No, I don't think so, she answered. I was just freaked out by getting a ticket. Martin nodded. Yeah, you're probably right. Over the next few weeks, the two teens worked overtime and skipped lunches in order to save up money to pay their ticket. Finally, nearly 1 month from the day they received their ticket, they went to the police station near Joe's house to pay the fine. They had decided to pay their fine a little early so they could go on Halloween night, using the evening's activities as an excuse to be gone so long. They entered the station at about 7 and looked around the lobby. Hey, can I help you? Sean O'Reilly asked the two teens, who looked lost and a little overwhelmed. Yeah, we need to pay a parking ticket, Martin said. You know, you can do that online, Sean offered. Yeah, we know, Kelly said, but you don't want your parents to find out, right? Sean asked with a grin. Exactly, Martin said with a sigh. Okay, come on over here, Sean said. I'm sure Officer Kazniewski can help you. Why would I write Kazniewski? I'm sure Officer Kazniewski can help you. Sean walked the teens over to see Zoe Kazniewski, the desk officer for the day. Hey, Kaz, can you help these two get this ticket paid so they can enjoy the rest of Halloween? He asked. Sure, she replied, reaching out from behind the bulletproof window. Let me see the ticket. Martin handed her the ticket and she glanced over it. Rolling her eyes, she shook her head. Nope, sorry. I'm afraid I can't help you, she said. What? Sean, Martin, and Kelly asked in concert. Kaz looked at the teens. Look, you don't have to pay it, she said. You're good. Wait, why not? Martin asked. I don't want this to go on my permanent record. You don't have to pay it because it isn't a real ticket, Kaz replied. We saw the cop who gave it to us, Kelly insisted. He was real. What did he look like? Kaz asked. He was tall, Martin said. Taller than me, like 6'2". Kelly nodded. It was dark outside, but I think he had brown hair, cut short, and brown eyes. And his tag said Werner, just like the signature on the ticket. Sean flinched and glanced at Kaz, who caught the glance and nodded slowly. Yeah, Kaz said to the teens. We get a couple of tickets a year from this guy. He used to be a cop, but he isn't anymore. So you're good, believe me. We really don't have to pay? Martin asked. No, you're good, Kaz insisted. Happy Halloween. Sean waited until the teens had walked out of the lobby before he leaned over towards Kaz. Werner? He asked. She nodded. I get a couple every year. Really? Werner? He repeated. She smiled. Weird, right? She asked. But I guess you can't keep a good cop down. You should have told them, Sean said. You should have told them the truth. Kaz smiled. Yeah, especially tonight, she replied. Hey, kids, just wanted you to know that you received a parking ticket from a cop who's been dead for 6 years. Sean winked at her. Yeah, happy Halloween. Seriously? Tom asked when Sean had finished the story. It was Werner? Sean nodded. Kaz swears she sees them at least a couple times a year, he replied, picking up a handful of candy corn and popping it into his mouth. Weird, right? Well, not so weird, Timothy said with an exaggerated sigh. Not when you've seen all I've seen in my day. His children smiled at each other as they readied themselves for their father's tale. Back in the day where you had to walk uphill both ways to go to school, Art said. Enough sass out of you, young man, Timothy replied with a smile. I'll share a story that will have you looking over your shoulder at night. Still sends shivers down me own spine, and it happened more than 30 years ago. Timothy O'Reilly was a young police officer with the Chicago Police Department. He was well liked and, more importantly, well respected by his peers and his superiors. Arriving at the station early one morning, he was summoned to his chief's office. He had to admit he was feeling a little bit of trepidation as he climbed the steps from the locker room in the basement to the second floor where the chief's office stood. He wondered what he could have possibly done wrong and mentally reviewed the last couple days on the job. Nothing was wrong as far as he could remember. Finally, he arrived at the office door and knocked. Enter, came the command from inside. Timothy opened the door and slipped inside. Officer O'Reilly, he announced. You sent for me, sir? The chief looked up from his paperwork and studied Timothy for a long moment. Yes, I did, he finally said. I need you for a special assignment today. Timothy nodded. Of course, he replied. I need you to take this evidence parcel to Champaign, Illinois, to their courthouse, he said, pointing to a small cardboard box on the edge of the desk. Then he picked up a piece of paper on his desk and held it out for Timothy. Here's the directions to the courthouse and the name of the person you need to give it to. Timothy scanned the paper and then looked up. Any questions? The chief asked. Shaking his head, Timothy tucked the paper in his pocket. No, sir, he answered. Good, the chief replied. They'll have a car waiting for you at the garage. Just drive there and drive back. Yes, sir, Timothy said, picking up the parcel from the corner of the desk. The squad car was waiting for him downstairs. Hey, O'Reilly, the head mechanic said as he handed him the keys. We've been having problems with this one, but the chief didn't give us enough notice to get you one of the newer squads. What kind of problems? Timothy asked. The mechanic shrugged. It just kind of quits on you for no reason, he said. Well, that could be a problem on the highway, Timothy replied. Yeah, exactly, the mechanic said. So where you can, take the back roads. And if you get into any problems, call me, and I'll send a wrecker out to rescue you. The mechanic gave Timothy a slightly greasy slip of paper with a phone number scribbled on it. Shoving it into his pocket, Timothy nodded. I'm hoping I don't have to use it, he said. Yeah, me too, the mechanic agreed. Timothy decided to take a risk, and he hopped onto the expressway out of the city, heading south toward Champaign. It was a late summer day, and once he'd driven beyond the city limits, cornfields with their crops as tall as a man were already beginning to brown in the fields on either side of Highway 57. The drive was peaceful, and the squad car was operating well. In no time, he arrived at the courthouse and delivered his package to the clerk. He'd made good time, so he allowed himself a few minutes for a quick lunch break at Ott's Drive-In, about 20 miles north of Champaign in Rantoul, Illinois. After ordering a burger, fries, and a chocolate shake, he pushed the seat back to the squad car and enjoyed his meal. The day couldn't have gone any better. He'd have to take Margaret down to Champaign sometime, he decided. He was sure she would enjoy the drive. When he finished the last fry and sipped the final bit of shake, he stuffed the wrappers in the bag and turned on the squad car. But it didn't start. He tried again, but it didn't react. He really didn't like the idea of calling a wrecker to come to a drive-in. Not that he'd done anything wrong by taking a lunch break, but he could already imagine the jabs he'd get at the station. Reaching down, he unlatched the hood. He didn't know a thing about cars, but maybe luck would be smiling down on him, and he'd see something obvious. Once under the hood, he poked and prodded at things, hoping something would help get his car started. With his fingers crossed for good luck, he went back to the driver's seat and tried it again. It started immediately. Taking no chances, he kept the car running while he got out, threw away his garbage, and closed the hood. He looked down at the map alongside him. The main highway was several miles to the west, but there was a smaller country road that led up into Chicago that just about paralleled the road. Just in case, he decided on the back road. Once again, the drive was beautiful. Timothy got up close and personal to the farms and small towns that were scattered throughout downstate Illinois. Because of the lowered speed limit, Timothy had the windows rolled down and was enjoying the sights and smells of the country. He had driven about 4 miles from a small town when he noticed that the car was acting up. He knew he was less than an hour from Chicago and hoped the engine would hang on. His hope was short-lived, as a few minutes later, everything in the car flashed for a moment, and then it stalled. Timothy had enough momentum going to carry him a little further down the road and then down the driveway of a farmhouse. As he brought the car to a stop, Timothy saw an elderly man walk from the farmhouse to the barn. He thought the man had seen him, but he wasn't sure. Well, there was nothing to do but call dispatch and have them put him through to the garage. Picking up the radio, he pressed the button, but got nothing but static. He tried again. Once again, there was no connection. He'd just have to find a phone. He got out of the squad car and walked toward the barn. He opened the door and in the dim light saw row upon row of milking stalls. It must be a dairy farm, he reasoned. He called out to the farmer, "Hello? You still in here?" Waiting a few moments, he stepped further into the barn. The cement floor running down the middle of the barn was swept clean, and fresh straw lay on the floors of each stall. Timothy took a deep breath. It smelled good. Sweet straw, country air, and a slight sense of manure. It reminded him of when he visited his grandparents in Ireland. "Hello," he called out again. "I'm needing some help." He turned and jumped, finding the elderly fireman standing just behind him. "Sorry," Timothy said, slightly embarrassed. "I guess I didn't hear you." "You having problems with your car?" he asked. Timothy nodded. "Yeah, I was wondering if I could use your phone and call for a wrecker." "Sure. There's a phone in the corner over there, he said, pointing to a small room. Would you like a glass of water? Timothy smiled and nodded. That would be really nice, he replied. He walked over to the phone, pulled out the scrap of paper, and dialed the number. Hello, this is O'Reilly, he said. I'm having a bit of trouble with the squad. It died on you, didn't it? The mechanic asked. Yes, but luckily I was on a country road, as you suggested, he replied. I'm on State Road 50, just north of Peatone. Hey, I know that area. I grew up in Monee, the mechanic said, naming a town only a few more miles up the road. Where are you? I'm at a small dairy farm, Timothy said, and then gave him the mileage from the last road he'd passed. Are you sure? The mechanic asked. Yeah, I'm positive, Timothy replied. As soon as the squad started acting up, I made sure I paid attention to where I was so you could find me. Okay, the mechanic said, his voice sounding strained. You just hang on tight. I'm going to bring the wrecker out there myself. I'll be there as soon as I can. Thanks, Timothy said with a shrug. I'll see you soon. He hung up the phone and turned to see the farmer entering the barn with a glass of water in his hand. Here you are, the farmer said. Thank you, Timothy replied, taking a sip of the cool water. That feels good on a hot day. Did you reach someone? The farmer asked, nodding toward the phone. Aye, and they'll be out within the hour, he replied. We should push your car back out by the road, the farmer suggested. That way he won't pass you by. They walked out of the barn and toward the squad car. Timothy finished the last of the water in the cup, looked around for a place to put the empty glass. On the picnic table is fine, the farmer said, understanding his needs. Now, you get in and I'll push. Timothy looked at the diminutive man and shook his head. No, I really think it's downhill from the barn to the road, the farmer said, cutting Timothy off. It's easier to have you steer and me push. Before he walked to the back of the car, the farmer took out an old handkerchief and wiped some of the grease from his hands. Doing a little mechanical work, he explained. Well, I surely appreciate your help, Timothy replied. With the farmer's help, the squad car was at the side of the road in no time. Timothy got out of the car to thank the man, but he was already halfway down the drive, heading back toward the barn. Thank you, he called out anyway, before he climbed back into the car to wait. Within record time, Timothy saw the wrecker speeding up the road to meet him. The mechanic climbed out and quickly came over to Timothy's car. Let's hurry and get you back to the station, he said, pulling the tow chain down and slipping it underneath the body of the car. The squad was ready for transport within 10 minutes. Wow, that was fast, Timothy said. Yeah, I know, the mechanic replied nervously. Come on, let's get the heck out of here. When they arrived at the garage, several members of the crew were waiting for them. The mechanic pulled the wrecker and squad car into the garage, and they both got out of the truck. So, did you talk to the farmer? One of the crew members asked, while the others chuckled beside him. What? Timothy asked, confused. Shut up, the mechanic growled at his crew. I don't want to go there. Go where? Timothy asked. Was there something wrong with the farmer? He seemed like a nice fellow to me. The mechanic froze in his tracks and turned to Timothy. You spoke to the farmer? He asked slowly. Aye. He let me use his phone, gave me a glass of water, and helped me push the squad to the road, he replied. He was a good guy. The mechanic stared at Timothy for several long moments and then finally said, his voice a hoarse whisper, that farmer shot himself 15 years ago in the barn of that old farm. The property's been abandoned for 8 years. No one can live there because it's haunted. So is it a YouTube thing or an us thing or what?
It shouldn't be us, but
Sorry.
okay. There we go. Okay. You should be up. I'm seeing you on the.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. You're back.
Okay. Sorry. So did the stories get finished? Did the stories get finished, guys? Because I can go back and reread if I need to. Yes. Sorry about the streaming issues.
Yeah, so Kitty just said that Tim just found out that no one had lived at the farm. So if you could just
okay,
that just maybe the last
okay
paragraphs or something. That's half page.
Right. Okay, so I'll go back to the mechanic froze in his tracks and turned to Timothy. You spoke to the farmer? He asked slowly. Aye. He let me use his phone, gave me a glass of water, and helped me push the squad onto the road, he replied. He was a good guy. The mechanic stared at Timothy for several long moments and then finally said, his voice a hoarse whisper, that farmer shot himself 15 years ago in the barn of that old farm. That property's been abandoned for 8 years. No one can live there because it's haunted. I didn't believe a word of it, Timothy said to his family in the flickering light of the jack-o'-lantern. So the next day I drove back out to the farm with another officer. The road was thick with brush and overgrown. The milking parlor was filled with garbage and cobwebs. We pushed our way through the mess to the room with the phone. It too was covered with dust, except for the fingerprints that looked fresh. My fingerprints. I picked up the phone, and there was no dial tone. He looked around the room at his family and nodded. And as I walked out of the barn, I spied the picnic table, now surrounded with tall weeds. But there in the middle was the glass I'd used the day before. Did they believe you? Mary asked. Back at the garage. Did they believe you? Well, they had no choice, did they? He replied, because on the trunk of the squad were the greasy prints of the farmer's hand who pushed me down the lane. And then I did end with dun dun dun. So
that's true. Can confirm she did do that.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Good. Sorry. I hate technical difficulties.
So we have about 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
I did ask them to ask some questions during the stories.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Said if you think of any questions, ask them. Because we're ending at 3:45 our time.
Okay. Perfect.
So there were a few questions.
Oh, good.
So I will ask it this way.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about ghost trains?
Oh, so the entire train being like a ghost thing and they hear it at night, is that kind of, because I've heard about those.
So Terry Snyder asks specifically, do you think there could be haunted trains or just a ghost driving them?
I think that there could be haunted trains. You know, why not? If there could be haunted cars and restaurants and things like that. Yeah, I think especially some of those old steam trains, I bet you could get some pretty funky feelings in those. As far as ghosts driving them, I think that they would just want to share the cab with the engineer, which would totally freak me out if I was an engineer. But yeah, I think that any place that is familiar had been familiar to somebody, or somebody died a violent death. Yeah, there could be ghosts in those.
So Terry Snyder and Kitty both had a conversation,
Okay.
sharing each other's stories
Okay.
about their experiences with ghost trains.
Oh.
So I'll read Terry's and
Okay.
then I'll read Kitty's.
Okay.
Because they both did chunks, and so
Okay.
I'll just do all
Okay.
of them. So
All right.
Terry Snyder said, a few years ago, just as we went to bed, there was a train that roared right outside our bedroom window, along with the whistle.
Cool.
She later said it rattled the windows. The nearest track is over 20 miles away. We never figured it out. And then she said, yesterday afternoon, we heard the train whistle again, but not as close, but closer than 20 miles.
Weird. Okay, that's cool.
And then Kitty
Yeah.
said, kind of answering that, I grew up in a small town and had a new set of tracks, and then there were the remains of an old line that ran through before the town had a crazy fire. Growing up, I lived near the new tracks. A couple times a week, you could hear the train, feel it rumbling down, but the arms didn't come down, and there was never a train there. Lived in an apartment right next to the new lines as an adult for a bit, and could still hear the train, but it was never when there was an actual train coming through.
There was an episode on Kindred Spirits where there was a train track involved with a death, and Amy went down to the train tracks, and she was standing there recording when the bells and the bell started and the thing came down, and there was no train. So yeah, ooh, we ought to investigate this whole ghost train idea. I love that. Maybe a Freaky Friday in the future. Nice. Thank you.
Ghost automotives in general, ghost trucks, ghost trains, ghost. I wonder if there's a ghost plane.
Oh, I already did a Freaky Friday on a ghost plane.
Oh, well,
because there was a crash, and then they used parts of that plane that crashed and people died in repairing other planes, and people see like the stewardesses and the pilots come walking through like dead guys. So yeah,
that's exciting.
Yeah. Makes you want to fly.
Halistrom, I think that's how you pronounce it, says, I heard a ghost plane once.
Really? So like up in the air and there's nothing there, but you could hear it. That would be cool.
Yeah. Some other conversations that had happened. This was before everything started, but everyone was just talking about, let's see, Kitty started it off. It's a sweltering day out on the runway, 98 degrees out here. Real feel, 109.
Whoa.
Plus Texas.
Oh, Texas. Okay. Yeah.
It's bigger in Texas.
It's hot. It's wet, damp, and cold here in Illinois. But it's so green. Everything is really greened up. But yeah, Texas, you guys get it warm. Yep.
Nancy Adams then said, rainy, good breeze, and about 60 degrees here in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
Good weather for a good story.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's that kind of a day here too.
And then, let's see. Terry Bowles said sunny and 70 in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, and I bet it's really green there in Louisville. Yep, I can just picture it. It'll be beautiful.
Some newer things that have been said.
Okay.
Terry Snyder said, I used to do armed security at an auto action yard, excuse me.
Okay. It's probably auction.
Okay, it could be auction. Yeah, you're right. For totaled insurance payoff cars. Total.
Okay.
For totaled insurance payoff cars. Talk about haunting at that place. We had a hard time keeping help. It was so haunted.
I bet, because if the cars were totaled, people might have been totaled with the cars. So, ooh. I think I Freaky Friday years ago about my son Nathan, who was in the Air Force at Dover, And he worked in the safety area, which is where they put together like the parachutes and things like that. That used to be the old morgue. And he, I don't know why that, it was like late at night, that kind of idea that you were talking about, kind of doing security. They would do shifts and he would work the night shift. And I remember he was on the phone with us one night and he said, a mom and a little girl just walked through and they were dead. So, yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to get a camera, on one of those places and see what you could find.
Hills Drum said, talking, I think, back about ghost planes. Bixby Bridge, Big Sur, California. The plane tried to fly under and it crashed into a mountain. I heard it when I was taking pictures off the bridge.
You heard it like after years after it happened.
I'm assuming.
Oh, ooh, chills. And I bet the feels on that bridge are just kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
Cool.
Terry Bowles said there's a small town in Kentucky called Glendale. There's a train that runs down the middle of town. There's no barriers or gate as the train passes, so lots of folks have been accidentally killed. The stores nearby hear people yelling for help in the early mornings.
Oh, I just got chills. I just totally got chills.
A really good friend of mine, this is my story.
Okay.
His dad works with one of the big train companies. I forget which one. And that's unfortunately a very common thing where, people will get drunk and get by there or just accidentally not notice
just not
trains.
See it. Yeah.
Also, it's a very dangerous job having a train in general. So many casualties.
Yeah.
Trains are just dangerous.
Yep.
Going along. Kitty said there are some stories about the old New York Central line in the city. I'll see if I can find anything other than a Facebook chat about the one in Phoenix.
I'd love to hear that. Thanks.
Terry Snyder talking about her totaled insurance payoff cars. She said, oh, yeah, I could tell some stories. We even saw ghosts.
Okay, share those at stories@terrireid.com. Boy, that was a no, I would love to hear those. That is so interesting and it makes perfect sense.
Terry Bowles, going back to the town in Kentucky, Glendale, Kentucky. She said one of the restaurants stopped serving breakfasts because of the calls out.
Oh, whoa.
I mean, I don't blame them. That'd be terrifying. Oh, man. Linda Wooten says, my boys and I were standing at the end of the driveway when they heard marching soldiers coming toward us. Never saw it, but the ghost soldiers walking right in front of us and kept walking down the road.
Okay, and you live in Tennessee, so I could totally see that happening. Wow. Okay. Yeah, they say that there's some places in the South that you don't travel at night. If you don't know the road, don't go on it. So I could so see that. But to hear a squadron march past your house. Cool.
Let's see. Terry Snyder, going back to the totaled insurance payoff. My boss got a video of a ghost. I asked him for a copy again because mine is still packed away from tornado damage.
Ooh.
He can't find it.
Ooh.
Kitty said, another weird place for encounters is the 62nd area at Camp Pendleton. You'll come across Marines in gray fatigues hiking down Basilone.
Okay.
Basilone Road. I think it's Basilone. That sounds Italian. That sounds right.
Okay. Cool.
Terry Snyder said that she'll share it.
Okay.
So I'll put the link just in case.
Okay.
It's not an actual link because YouTube won't let us link it because they don't trust us yet. We don't have enough subscribers.
Because we're so nefarious. Oh, yeah. Subscribe so we can post links.
Tell your friends to subscribe. There you go. Okay. Stories at Terri Reid. Not org. Oh, no. What was I doing?
TerriReid.com.
Stories. Disregard the first one.
You just can't get good help these days. Even when you pay him with cookies, you still can't get good help.
That's the problem. I'm not thinking with
It's got a sugar high.
spinaches. I'm thinking with sugar. Terry Bowles said, "My husband worked at the Kentucky Air National Guard as a military cop. The hangars are haunted."
I can imagine. Isn't it? Yeah. I think I've told you David's stories when he was in the army, the things that happened to him when he was in Afghanistan. Lots of spooky things. So how are we doing time-wise?
It's 47, so we got to wrap up here.
Okay, so for those of you who are going to do the writer's thing, I'll see you in 13 minutes or 12 minutes, depending on when we yes. And click on that link so you kind of know what I'm talking about. And for those of you who aren't, I'll see you here next week. Yay! Thanks so much for coming. Talk to you soon. Bye.